Awesome. So good morning, fam. Super stoked to be here. And so we're not many right now. So I just would like to say that if anybody wants to say anything, uh, let me see where I can put the messages. Okay. So I'll try to follow along. If anybody can help me with the questions,
I got you.
please interrupt me.
I
Okay.
got you.
Awesome. So please interrupt me whenever, unless like don't interrupt me every 2 seconds.
All
But I
right, sure.
think. Okay. So learn from legend. I did this like beautiful presentation just to organize my thoughts. It's always a good time when you make a presentation, it's great because you get to clear, and think about your process, and that's really fun. So the idea behind this today is like how can you create characters that you can actually explain, like why what you do is so cool, right? So that's something that's really important because as they say, right, if you don't know how to explain something, it means you don't understand it. And so I want to help you out, like understand why you like the characters you create, or if you get like a blockage and you don't know what to do, or you feel like uninspired or whatever, these kinds of informations help me a lot to get the motor running again. Okay, so first up, like the proportions, I want to speak about the proportions of a character, which are super important. Usually, you have the head count. Okay, so that's a really great way to understand like the proportions of one of your characters. And a human is usually 7 to 8 heads. The one I shared before here, it's like this would be like 10 heads, right? So depending on how you organize the count of the proportion of how many heads does your character have, it allows you to create a feeling, And then there's also situations like age, right? So if you see it, the one that's here before, like if you have the ones on the bottom, you can see a kid might be 3 heads. A young kid might be like 4 heads. So that's if you want to be anatomically correct in human sense. But like for us in the Toon world, things change a bit more and we can play along. And for example, with Croco, this is a great example I think for me is I started him as a kid, as a young crocodile, but when I started to imagine how I wanted this character to become, I wanted to adultify him a little. So one of the best ways to do it is instead of changing I kept the head scale and changed the body. Okay, so this is something that I would recommend anybody who's creating characters. Like at some point when you have your body proportions more or less set, play along, and how would it look if I change the scale of the head? And you will see how just by doing that, you can vary the age of your character. And so tell me what you want to communicate, and I'll tell you how big the head should be. This is super important because, as you see in this image, this is a group of images I like to put along, like a scale. I usually share this type of things with my clients when we are looking to understand what we want to create. It all looks very different, right? And just by the size of the scale, you're going to make something that's much more uh, kawaii, like much more or like chibi kind of style, or you can make it more into an art toy style, which is a world that I like to live in. And then if you go more to the right, just by scaling the head or making the limbs a bit thinner and stuff like that, you create a character that looks much more adult and much more maybe complex. So looking at these together, it's super interesting because what is the effect you want to create, right? What's the appeal? And I find that the ones like the on the left are super cute. What's my take on those type of characters? There are so many of these that how can you make yours special and yours get out of the white noise, right? So that's something that is very interesting. And if you go to Behance and especially like a lot of Korean studios have beautiful animations and beautiful character designs, but I wouldn't know how to differentiate which studio is which and which is, another one. So I think that's important if you're looking for a voice. Like, how can you think about your style in order to differentiate yourself? And there's a lot of ways to play with that. In the middle, that's the art toy world, which is one that I really love. You can just, play along with proportions and see what works best. But in general, a bigger head also allows for more expressiveness, and it allows for a more like a bigger connection with the audience. Okay, and that's super important because in the end of the day, what do we want? We want to connect with others. Okay, so and that's where if you know the rules, you break them. Later on, we can go into Cinema 4D. Okay, and I can show you some examples or how how we can do this in a tangible way, but I thought it was nice if we could speak about it first. So in this case, for example, how do I break the rules? By making the head so small, it makes it much more fashionable. It makes it much more sculptural. And in this case, we wanted the characters to show to be like super fashionable, right? So the head wasn't as important. And if you think about how fashion works and how the models look at you in the magazines and everywhere, they're always serious, they're always neutral, you know? So this worked very well in a conceptualized way, and it magnified it, made it much more sculptural. Okay, and then for example, there's a point that is always super important is how many fingers. Okay, so the less fingers, the more toony. A thumb was always important. You could also have a no hand, right? So it really depends. And like for example, the one on the left and on the middle, they both have 5 fingers, but one is a bit more detailed. So if you make the part in the middle, the palm, a bit longer, suddenly it becomes much more human. It's very important, especially in the hands. How can you make sure there's a cohesiveness between what you're doing in the face, in the head, and what's going on, in the rest of the body? And the hands is what shows the most. Okay, so if you make the hands super big, it's going to make it more a caricature. It's going to make it much more toony. If you go for 4 fingers, it's toony easy. Something that's very interesting to me is Mario Bros is 5 fingers. I always thought it was 4. And what's curious as well is that not all of the Mario Bros characters have 5 fingers. Like I think Yoshi has 4. So I don't have an explanation for that. I have a lot of questions though, and it also brings the attention that you can do whatever you like in a creative way as long as you find a unified way to explain why it works in your world. Okay. And something that's also one thing I was going to say about the hands. Yes, the technical side of things. Okay. So Mixamo, for example, likes 5 fingers. Usually mocap softwares prefer 5 fingers. So, if you want to simplify your life and you do 5 fingers, that will help a lot. That's how I did Fluffy the Bunny for my typical Friends characters. If you're going to do 4 fingers, that's also okay. The only thing is that, at least from what I know, you would take your character to Mixamo, you bring it back down, and what you do is with the skin weights, you remove the skin weight of the pinky or of the index. I think it's a pinky. So that way, when you re-upload your character to Mixamo or to a mocap software, it doesn't recognize that pinky. And so even if it has a 5 finger universal kind of body structure, joint bone structure, it will work for your character. Okay. So stylizing, once you have like the idea of the proportions and you have the idea of like the size of the head, and if you know how many fingers you're going to want, this is where your voice as a creator starts, right? So in this case, like the beauty that we have as artists is that we reinterpret, we reimagine life through our own eyes, and we express it through culture that we've known. And like skulls for me have always been a very hypnotizing and very like catching kind of a subject because they represent us, right? They represent humanity. I can imagine like you see skulls and they have so much information inside them, and also aesthetically they're absolutely beautiful. I don't know why they are, but I think many of us are attracted to skulls in a very special way. And so like you can see many artists that have done skulls. You can see Murakami skull. You can see, I mean, right now I wouldn't be able to tell you many artists, but I know because I've been studying that and seeing how other artists represent skulls. And this case was a clone head skull, which exists in Peru, exists in Mexico, exists in Egypt as well. And there's like a lot of fascination on how the skull has that shape, why they have these holes. So I'm not going to get into that. I did a whole study about that. But what I loved was how can I simplify and stylize this character in a way that it brings into this world of contemporary pop art culture, and this stylization which comes from understanding how you want to create the shapes, right? Which in my case were like very eggy kind of type, right? So this brings us to get into shape, and shapes is super important when you have when you want to express yourself, express a character, you always think in shapes. Okay, so if you go like, I don't even need to explain. I'm sure that you can see the effect that it creates in you. To see the one on the left, Up is a great example, the movie from Pixar. All right, so how it is when it's round, how it is when it's squared, how it is when it's triangular. So if you want to make a mean character, go through the triangular. If you want to make a cute and innocent character, go through the circle. Okay, so this is something that's very important in terms of how this can help you when maybe you're stuck creating, or maybe not you're stuck, but when you're planning your characters and you don't know how you can add that personality into shape. These are things that can help you very much. And it's like in the unconscious, it's universal. It's going to help you automatically build your character, all right? So I think it's very clear that on the left, the circle, it's soft, it's approachable, innocent, the middle one is strong and flexible, balance, and the triangle is dynamic, sharp, dangerous. You don't. It's not only these three characteristics for each. There can be many more, but there is a very strong dynamic when you decide what you're going to go through, or if you're a bit stuck, like, okay, so my character seems like I want to make him a bit more badass, or a bit meaner. Okay, so how about I make the jaw a bit pointier, right? Or how about the hairstyle is a bit more like made of triangles instead of how I have it right now. Okay, so those kinds of tips and tricks help you define your character on the way that you want to. Female characters for me, and I think I checked ChatGPT to see if it was something universal. It seems to be it is. Are a bit more complex in my opinion than men, and the reason is when I don't know if you like when you draw an eye of a male, female doesn't matter. If you put like a dot of the lighting on one side, or if you put uh, like hair, to the eyelid, it just changes the eye completely. With females, there are so many different areas of the body that can just make you screw up, right? Like the size of the waist, the hips, the neck, then all these kinds of things require a study in order to make the character look good, and especially like not over sexualize it, not over infantilize it. And so like in this case, the one I work with Nike, or also like with other characters that I've made where I have the male and the female, usually the female character has smaller hands, thinner neck, sometimes a little bit longer neck as well. I think that creates a lot of elegance. I lift, the legs, so it has longer legs, so that makes the hip and the waist area a little bit taller and a bit like compressed. And there I start to stylize. And so the chest area is always very difficult in terms of you don't want to, at least in my case, I don't want to over sexualize it. So how can I create breasts that are understood as breasts, but don't just take too much attention? And how is that going to also work well when you put clothes on top? So that's something that, of course, you can find animes, you can find references that work very well. But when you're creating a character and with different proportions, that's it. You get into many more questions. As you create characters or something, and why like what I'm explaining right now, I think it helps a lot. From the beginning to now, is because you're always making decisions on what am I going to do, and like every part of the body suddenly becomes a problem to solve, right? So how many fingers, like how long is the neck, how the body proportions are going to help me explain my character, the shapes, and so you think big in terms of the head's amount, right? The head count to understand the general proportion that's going to help you down the road. But then you're going to have to go like part by part and structurally try to understand how to make sure that it all feels as a single character. And so the goal for, I mean, the goal for any character artist, I believe, is to create an icon, right? So we need to make sure as well when we're creating a character that the silhouette is recognizable. It usually always is. So I think the beauty of these characters, for example, Mickey Flintstone and Daffy Duck, is that they're recognizable already and we love them as they are. But it's true that it's easy to recognize in terms of like they are remembering the ones I mentioned about the cute little characters, like these, you can understand who you can recognize who they are automatically. Remove or add, and so that I can create something that's unique. Okay, for example, like the tail of Mickey Mouse. I don't remember I had a tail. That's funny. And so, how can you make iconic traits? So you have to think about what makes it instantly recognizable, and that's where the head comes in, right? Especially, I mean, the body comes in as well, but the head is super important for that. Hello Kitty is like the best example, in my opinion, I've ever seen, because well, she's world famous. I think many of us, like Labubu is the modern Hello Kitty right now. But what Hello Kitty had, and which was amazing, is there's no mouth. So by not having a mouth, there's like this Gestalt connection. I don't know if you know about the psychology of Gestalt, where like you do a circle, but you don't, but you leave a part blank. So like your mind completes a circle. You know, so it's like this psychology where your mind completes what it sees, or does a difference, or subtracts. And in this case, that's a bit how I think Hello Kitty works. Is Hello Kitty feels how you feel at the moment, or Hello Kitty will feel how you want her to feel. You project your thoughts into her. So the beauty of this is you complete the character. So the connection between the art and the user blends perfectly. And so she has that super important element, and also she has that bow tie that makes it like super recognizable. Okay, so how can you become, in my opinion, is like how can I stay stylized, minimalist, but powerful, right? So when I did Mr. Cat, when I first created Mr. Cat, what I did was a tongue. The tongue was like the most uh, iconic trait that I found, and it was actually based on real events, right? Like I don't know if you guys have cats. Often they stick their tongue out, and it's super cute. So something that aesthetically was very pleasing, I think it helped very well compose as well the image, was actually based on something real where everybody can feel related to. And that's how I started with Mr. Cat and Friends. I don't know if I have an image there. No. Okay, I'll show. I can show you later, or you can look in my Instagram. All my characters had that. So that was like the way for me to represent a character that would be instantly recognizable, as well as those eyes that felt modern because of the minimalism, but also like old, old school kind of cartoons, which gave it a certain classic and elegant vibe that I liked. Do we have any questions?
Nah, team, we're good. They're enjoying the workshop, right?
Okay, okay, because so let me see. Yeah, women are super complex, lovely. I'm happy that you say so because it's true. Um, it's something that's really, but it's also I've been training female characters for a lot because of that. You know, like because in the end, is when you're creating a model and you're not taking from like a an anime that you can download, you know, like or like the Clonex that are actually from that software. I forgot the name right now, where you can download characters, which are amazing. Well, when you're doing it yourself, you enter a lot of questions. You know, you start asking yourself a lot of questions, and you have to make a lot of decisions, and you want to make your character a certain way. Generally, you want your character to be cool. You know, like these girls, right? For Nike, you know, and you also want it to be a character that female person, a woman wants to use, right? You see all these animes and they're very sexualized, which okay, I mean some women might want to be like this, which is great, but I think that the spectrum is so large, right? Like there's so many different ways to represent a female. However, a male is not so it's not there's not as much. It's also difficult. Everything is always difficult, but it's not there's not as much. Okay, and then we got the expressions. So this is also something that's very important, and I've been practicing a lot. And I had the issue with Mr. Cat. So Mr. Cat was sculptural, was very like a jewel, which was beautiful in terms of like it could be IPable, but it was very difficult for expression. And I'll show us a few images later. And I always love to check out 2D characters and how they express themselves because 2D doesn't have the restraints of topology. but they're great references of how you can express yourself to the maximum, like these gumball images. And so I've always been interested in creating this into a 3D character, which I think I've achieved with Croco. And on the right, there's the other side of the blend shape. So blend shapes, shape keys, you call them in Blender, which is it's for those who don't do 3D, it's you have your mesh, and you can create so create a new shape key where I'm going to move these points in order to make a new expression or whatever I want. And then I can always go back to the base pose, which is a neutral and untouched mesh. And like with the slider, you can go from 0 to 100 to this new adaptation of your mesh. And it has to always be the same mesh, no new points, no new nothing. So with the topology that you already have, you start stretching points in order to create expressions. And so you have one side, which is the character, the personality, right? The one that's going to make others laugh. And most especially, the goal for me is how can I make you want to share? And to make this want to share, we'll talk about this later. It's not about you contemplating and saying, wow, this guy's an amazing artist. It's about saying, like, I don't really care who the artist is. What I care is that this character represents me and what I want to say. Okay, so that's like the biggest goal. Recognizing the artist is something that would come secondary, and of course it's very rewarding, but that's not the goal of creating a character, at least in my opinion. And on the right, you have the expressions that you need in order to speak. Okay, here's an example of ha, pa, I, na, u. So usually you have another type of the phonetical ones you can have, right? So A, E, I, O, U. Or you can also have like the ArtKit blend shapes, which is much more complex, which there are 52 of them, which is more complex because you have like upper, right, lip, side, or I look up left. So you separate the expressions of the face in a very technical way, but that has a reason. It's so that in motion capture, the facial recognition can recognize the human talking or expressing himself, and it will automatically detect which parts of the mesh needs moving. Okay, so that's one type of movement for the face. And then there's the other one, which for me is much more interesting, which is how can we express like the one on the left, or maybe even these, right? How can you make expressions that are much more representative? But it's more about, it's not like to follow a human talking all the time. It's a bit more generic. So here's what happened with Mr. Cat, which was, this was a nightmare. So nightmares are the best way to learn, right? And a change comes from, I've had enough. I've had enough of this. I need to find a new way. So I really invested a lot of time in finding a way to make Mr. Cat express himself. These are just a few of the mouth expressions that I found, and it had to be done with the same topology. For those who don't understand 3D, the topology is how the mesh is organized. The mesh is organized. We can see that later in like little squares, which are polygons. And it's important that this mesh is created in a way that allows for stretching of the eyes, of the mouth most specifically, but other areas. Okay, but in this case would be for the mouth and the eyes. And so what I loved about this is it had this stop motion kind of vibe, right? What I didn't love is that it became very difficult to animate. And it was very difficult as well to create an expression that was much more caricature. So stop motion was more of a, I was forced than actually is what I wanted to do. And I really liked them, but it was too difficult to create expressions with it. So that's what happened with Mr. Cat. It was a project that allowed me to get into character design, to suddenly become a character artist and reinvent my career from motion design, post-production to character, which was all amazing. And as an IP, the limitations came. I licensed it in China, for example, for a while. As an IP, it was more of an IP for merchandising, which is something that actually I still love. And I love this character dearly, and I think that at some point, who knows when, it has a lot of potential. So I have no No rush with that. I could show you some jewels maybe or something that was created later. And okay, that's for Mr. Cat. And then Croco comes in. Okay, so Croco, as you can see, has a lot more expressive capacities, and it's all created with the blend shapes that I was mentioning earlier. So what's good with blend shapes? You don't need to be a super pro. You can create expression through movement of the mesh. Super pro rigs have a lot of tweaking sides. So first of all, you'd have, like, for example, the bone for the jaw, which I think Croco has, but which opens and closes, and you have to position it in a very special place, specific way, so that it opens correctly. And then you have like a lot of little bones, okay, in all the mouth area and the eye area, so that you can rotate and move as a whole or individually. I'm not an expert rigger. I love to see expert rigs, but that's something as well that becomes much more complex and will work for or very professional and specialized studios that can understand how to use that for AR, VR, etc. Or it will just be for movies. And like in my case, which is more like a consumer kind of rig, I don't want to get into those type of problems. And it would be very difficult, like to do changes and modifications and stuff like that. So super rigs are beautiful. They're complex and they're more for animated movies. Then you have like simple rigs that with Mixamo you can put the jaw, for example, and you can open and close, but that becomes a bit too static. And then you have the blend shapes, which are a bit like a stylized artistic way of managing it. But as you can see, you can these are not the most expressive ones. I have a few more, like the one below. Like you can lift the eyebrows, you can make the spikes larger, longer. You can wrinkle the skin, but of course, always it's as if you were sculpting it. And as I mentioned before, you would make like in Cinema 4D it's called blend shape, in Blender it's called shape key. You would create a new shape key, and for example, you can name it angry. Okay. And so you take that mesh and you deform it in a way that your character looks angry. And then you do a new blend shape and you say happy, okay, and so or smile, and so you drag the side of the mouth upwards, and that gives it the sensation that he's smiling. And so you can go from a slider 0 to 100 from one to the other, and you can make a character that more or less express himself. And for me in social media, that's like the major impact that I think is important. Okay, so now let's talk about you, right? So what creates, what gives you the creative juice, to work and to make characters? Why do you create characters? And in my experience, what has helped me a lot is to understand what's my story. And something that was always a blockage is like, oh, but my story, I'm not such a special person and I don't have so many problems, or like, I don't know, I don't come from this like tragic event, which if you do, it's great. I mean, it can give you like information, but sometimes the simple things in life can help a lot in order to create. And what's most important is to connect with who you are, with your daily things, with your regular life, and understand why you like what you like. So there is this like side homework that you have when you create characters is to get to know yourself. And there's not really an explanation, or I wouldn't know like what the steps are to that. I think it's more about experimenting, but most importantly, I think, is recognizing. When you like something, oh, okay, I do like something because of this or because of that, or like my story about Mr. Cat is because my wife used to call me Señor Gato. Señor Gato is Mr. Cat in Spanish, because she loves cats. I didn't have cats before I met her, and we would walk like we adopted a cat that we found in a park, and she was black and white. Okay, and so basically, I started drawing sketches of cats, and when I started with 3D, I didn't want to call myself Jamie Alvarez because it was very not marketing. It was not promotional. Like it's just a regular name. So I wanted to find myself a new name, and that just sounded right. So in my case, it's what sounds right for you. What name, what personality, what type of character can you create that you feel comfortable with? That's super important, and you'll feel comfortable with it because you understand who you are, what you want to do, you're going to be creating a character that you're going to live with for a long time, or that's like the goal, I think, at least for me, and I guess for many people. So they become like your friends, your kids, your, I don't know, they're your pets, you call it what you want, but they become something, they become a part of you, a very important part of you. So who or what do you want to have next to you for the next, 1, 5, 10, 20 years? And then something that's very important as well is what content do you like to watch, right? So are you more into anime? Are you more into like the Warner type of cartoons, more into Pixar, more into the French type of animations, which the artists in France are, and like the comic books in Belgium that are amazing. So you start recognizing different styles and you start to see what you like and what speaks to you. And so by doing that and mixing it with your story, that's when you start to embrace, the culture that you like, to recognize the culture that you like and see how you can adapt and what you can do to uh, participate, with in your own way. And that's what I think it removes a lot of that pressure of I want to be creative, I want to be, do something special. It's special because it's from you, and there's only one you. And even though that sounds cheesy and like for the bump car, right, for the sticker in a car, it's true. And that's what's going to make it special. It's just because you're going to understand who you are, you're going to realize what kind of art you like, and you're going to try to see why you like that art. So, for example, in my case, I don't really watch cartoons, but I love cartoons in the sense that they're icons. And I think they're icons because brands have made them icons. Snoopy is an icon because, from what I read, I think in Charlie Horvath was mentioning in a post, in Japan, they've been like 70 years wanting to like construct it into a brand, and they become icons. They live as themselves as independent characters. Garfield lives as an independent character. I love Mickey because of who he represents. I go to Disneyland, it's cool, but Disneyland, I mean, is not my favorite place to be. But I go to study character. I don't go to enjoy it as like a ride, So that's what is important. Characters that I do like, I love Daffy Duck because he's full of flaws, So that's another thing that we could talk about, why flaws are much better and why storytelling works best with anti-heroes and flaws. But that's like for another day. Okay, so understand like what content you enjoy. And then the next one, which is basically the most important if you want to have a reach, is how can that benefit others, right? So what you create is not so people can applaud you and say, oh, this person is so great, so smart, so cool. I mean, if they think that, so be it. That's amazing. And it's very, you appreciate it, of course. But the reason that you create and that connects with people is that they feel a belonging, all right? They feel that by having or sharing or posting this character, independently if it's Web3 or Web2, it makes them part of something, right? They understand a culture, they understand something, and it also gives them status. Okay, so it makes them special in terms of they can tell people, yes, I'm part of the crew that, I knew this character before anybody else, so that makes them very special. And I think that's more important to users than I know this artist or this other artist. I think many people don't even know who the artist of Labubu is, right? And it's not a problem. And that's also or like you read a book, and only when you start reading a lot of books will you maybe want to go for the who's the author, right? You'll be interested. I love watching movies because I like to see who the director is before even the summary of the movie. Okay, so I know if it's going to be like a Brian De Palma or it's going to be a Coppola or it's going to be a Scorsese movie, I know what I'm going to get into and I want to understand his or her vision. Okay, so or Sofia Coppola, for example. So that's super important, but that's secondary. That's when somebody is already really into it and they want to dig deeper. And that's where you as an artist comes up and create maybe a different type of fan base. But as a beginning, when you're working commercially or you're working for like different, when you're creating something, I think what's important is how can I create something that people want to share, independently if they know I did it or not. I hope that makes sense. Maybe I spoke too much about this, but I think it's important. And then there's another thing that's super important. It's the mood. And this comes from lighting, from camera positioning. And here I will open Cinema 4D for a little bit. Okay, I want to show you something. 1 second, I'm gonna see if there's any questions.
Before you
Any
move to the
questions?
next, I have a question myself. What do you think what's one thing people overthink too much in character design?
One thing before overthinking?
No. What's one thing that people overthink too much in character designing?
Okay. What's one thing that people overthink too much in character design? I would say they want their character to be a superhero.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And that's a psychological thing, okay? Because
Mhm.
we want to be cool and we want to be seen as cool people, okay? And that's how we are wired, right? And by doing that, you're showing yourself when you create a character. And it's like, yeah, I'm Superman, I'm super strong, I'm
Yep.
super cool. And by doing that, you're hiding what's most important and what makes a character special. Because perfect people or perfect characters are boring or are dull, at least for storytelling. So I think overthinking in the sense that maybe they're overthinking and how can I hide elements that would be much more interesting than creating a character that's super cool, and that's it.
Yep. All right.
Is that a good answer?
Yes, sir. Got me good.
Awesome. Cool. So here's a cool snake that I love. Took me a long time. I'll show you. Look, I can show you like different steps of the snake. If I don't know if I deleted it. Let me check. 1 sec. Snake. What's a cobra? It's a cobra now, but it used to be a snake. And I'm gonna hide. You can see my screen, right? You can see everything.
Yep, perfect.
Okay. Okay, so here's the beautiful snake, cobra. Okay. And so before, I also had a snake. Okay. And so what's cool with these eyes, for example, these eyes are like relaxed, chill, casual, and that's what Croco has, for example, and I like it very much. Okay. Important to mention as well that in your career, at least I like to think about. I saw this in a keynote speaker, and he showed all his characters. He didn't do character. He did typography. All his projects from when he started professionally to now, and he talked about how each project connected to the next or to the ones after. And it's like it's all a whole one single project, like because every project teaches you something, whether it's what you don't want anymore, whether what you like, whether what you want to keep exploring. And so each project allows you to learn a little more and continue progressing, So it's like one big project in the end, okay? I don't have here the basic one before. Okay, so for example, you can see this one. I'm going to do something so you can see it better. 1 sec. So this is Cinema 4D for those who don't know. Okay, I know I have to get to Blender, but I'm going slowly. So I'm going to save this, store, and I'm going to show you a previous version of the Cobra. Okay. So as you can see, the sides now have more extrusion than the one on the left. Initially, when I did this, I was like, "Well, I think it's really cool because it was just a test of pushing the meshes on the side, and to make the snake a little bit more, have a little bit more detail. Like how can you? There's something I love is maximalism, and maximalism is something you can. This is not maximalist, but just to express my thought is a composition with a lot of things, but if you just seems like one single minimalist design, right? So you look at it as a whole and it seems simple, but then you start getting in and saying, "Oh, look at this detail over here. Look at this detail. Look how you can notice a line or like the separation of the nostrils, and you have these two bumps." Okay, and you start noticing a lot of details, or like the lines in the middle of the neck and how there's a separation here, and so it's something simple to watch, but when you start looking deeper, you can find a lot of information. So that's something that I really love. And so when I did this, it's like, okay, first time I did it, I love it, but then I come back, I'm like, no, it doesn't have enough detail. And so I iterate a lot. Right now in this clothing, this is a test which I'm not confident yet, is how can I make more creases to make it more baggy with a simple way that looks like a bit artoish. So I'm still like in progress with that one. Okay, so I'm going to remove this, go back to where I was. And what I wanted to mention about the mood. So HDRIs are a great way to express mood. Okay. So if you don't know what an HDRI is, I just bought this not long ago because I got the Black Friday Octane, which is a render engine, and they gave the Grayscale Gorilla library, which is amazing. And you have like HDRIs. Okay. So HDRIs are like, I don't know the technical explanation, but it's like a picture that you can add to your scene, and it's spherical, and it balances all the light as if you were in that space. So when you have an HDRI light, like right now I have that one, okay, and I activate it, you see how it changes, right? So let's turn off all the lights, okay? So no lights, okay? This is just a plane that I put in the back, and let's add one light at a time. So this is one light. Turn this off. Okay, then you have, like, for example, this one. Okay, and depending on how you place your lights, you're going to create a different mood. Where is this light? Oh yeah, okay, I can see it. Okay, so you can, if you make it closer, it's stronger. Okay, this makes it dimmer, right? And has a beautiful, just like this, it already starts looking really cool, right? But an image like this one, you wouldn't be showing like the face, which you need to show, but it gives you this like secrecy. Okay, it creates a mood, which is what I wanted to mention. And when you add a HDR with this one, you can amp up the power. Okay, and you can also rotate it to the sides, up and down. So basically, if you have a character and you're not like good at lighting, add an HDRI, test different HDRIs. Because also, if the HDRI, for example, is very blue, I'm gonna use the ones I downloaded, like a sky, it's all gonna be super blue, you know. And if you use, for example, this one, modern industrial, I'm gonna delete this one sec. Okay, this one. All right, and then you can start rotating, then you can get a different vibe. Something that I really like as well is the gobo. So some lights, let me see if let's just look for it. Gobos. Gobo. You add this like if it was on your light. So it creates a sense of shadowing, like if you were looking from, if there was a light coming through the window, okay? Or like if it was in the underwater and stuff like that. So I have a gobo here. And again, this is like not only for Grayscale Gorilla, you have it in Blender. You can find it different ways. In Blender, I use Easy HDRI, for example. And so like this control, I can change the position. All right. And so this already gives you a different vibe, right? Like an exterior vibe. Or if you were, if I put it closer, it could be like, let me see. Like if you were in a room, all right? I'm doing this really bad, okay? But I hope you get the point. And just by doing this, it just changed completely the whole look and feel of the character. Okay, so that's super important. You also have the temperature. Okay, so there is a different, the Kelvin temperature is for different lighting. So if you go like to 6,500, that would be exterior light, which is much bluer. So the temperature of your light also affects how you create. Okay, so I'm not going to get in too deep into lighting. I'm not a lighting specialist. I usually use these kinds of collections because I spend all my time creating the characters. All right. Okay, so here's where the HDRIs are. Okay, you have a free one online, which is Polyhaven, I think it's called. And you have a lot of resources. I want to check out where the gobos are. Yeah, here, the caustics, animated loops. Okay, so you add it, right? And you can create your own kind of scene. So you can just put like a street, asphalt, you know, a sidewalk, a building in behind, and you put one of these, and you can make it feel like there's a tree that's blocking the sun, and it gives you a lot of depth. I've been usually working with more studio lighting, you know, because it's like more of a showcasing the character, focusing on just showing it. But I think it's important to mention so that you can know that a character doesn't stop when modeling it. The mood that you create is going to create a lot of personality. This one was made by Haslu, which I'm sure many of you know. Okay, what else do I have here? Nothing. Okay. So we've covered a few things. I think the most basic and important ones, but like there would be more, like the topology. Topology, for those who don't know, would be this over here. Okay. So as you can see, you have, let me see if I can select it. The edge loops that I was mentioning so that you can create your blend shapes. It's very manual, you know. Let me put a side by side so you can see. I'm going to remove the gobo, which is bothering me. Okay. I'm going to put two views side by side. There you go. And so right now this mesh isn't subdivided. When it is, and it's smoother. Okay. I can do it like this for those who don't know. And so you go like that, and you can make him smile. But then you would start thinking, okay, so if I make him smile over here, should I make him smile over here as well? How are we going to open the mouth so this looks natural? And that's where new problems appear, you know. And you're always solving problems, okay? So this would be like another way of opening the mouth. Okay. Jaw drop. And then you'd have to clean up. Problem with super important with blend shapes is that once that you start blend shapes, you can't add more polygons. Well, I think you can if you don't change the mesh. Like I can add an edge loop if I need, but I can't like do like remove one of these vertices and add another one, because then it just breaks the blend shape. So what do I see here? I would need a few more edge loops here so that I can make this rounder. And I'll have to analyze if this mouth is okay here. It looks really cool in neutral. And that's like an issue because maybe I would need to make the mouth a bit bigger over here. But the neutral, bring it back so it keeps that like not big mouth kind of thing. All right, so that's what you have to do like on a daily basis when you're doing blend shapes and expressions so it looks good. Okay. What else we have here? For example, the camera settings. So this is super cool as well. Camera, 1 second, where are you? Okay, so like right now, this camera is a 90 millimeter. You're gonna see the difference if you go like 30 millimeter, right? I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna put it over here, so I can. All right, so with a angular camera, it gives you a much more dynamic kind of range, but it's not as good for a portrait because if you want to have the face looking good, you can see like the feet are completely angled. Okay, you can do fisheye as well. So this will also help you express yourself in a different way. If I go crazy with a 18 millimeter, okay, it looks like this, and it makes it very video clip kind of style, which is cool. It can work for a purpose, but like for a PFP, I'd rather go for something like this, maybe, you know, maybe not that much. This is 100, and you can see the difference. It practically just changes your whole character, which is also crazy because after you're going to 3D print, you're going to recognize the character, but it doesn't look like your 3D render because your 3D render has different lighting, has a different the camera, which changes everything, and the lighting also showcases more of something than the other, you know, and it gives a special vibe. So that's also something very important to analyze. Then you have like this is Super Tele. Wow, this is really nice. The more you go in Tele, which is like probably 100, 300, the more depth of field you have, so you can create a lot of depth of field. Sorry. Okay. And it just changes your character completely. I'm going to put the cool snake, not this one. The cool cobra, sorry. Okay. This gives me a Beverly Hills Cop kind of vibe. Okay. So as you can see, it gives you a completely different feeling. And then the character pose, when you want to do something that's more like an art toy, the art toys very often are like arms down, you know, like the Kid Robot or like the Bear Bricks. But if you want to do something more expressive, like for example more toony, then you'll go more into action, you know. So that's something that's very important as well because it's going to define where you're placing your character. If you wanted to make it thinking as for entertainment and animation, or if you want to make it more of like a sculptural model. Okay, when you look at, once again, like I said before about the models, they usually aren't smiling or laughing. They're very like neutral. It's like when you look at ancient sculptures, you know, the positions that they have, they're not as dynamic as if you would see, for example, this, the rabbit that Nike did. So I designed the rabbit, and then here, they decided to pose it like this, you know? So really give it an action. This was the rabbit. Or the tiger, right? So it was like a breakdance kind of pose. This was a tiger. Okay. And the color palette. So that's a whole different vibe as well. So you also have to think about how to make a color palette that doesn't go crazy, how to focus the attention. There's the rule of the 60-30-10, for example. 60% is one color, 30% is another one, 10% is the last one, in order to create balance. So we're talking about balance in terms of proportions, balance in terms of color palette, balance in terms of how you're going to create a cohesiveness when you're making solutions of how the hand is going to look. I see a lot of characters, I'm going to be honest, in Web3 where the arms feel like from one body, one character, the head feels from another one, the feet from another one, and it's lacking cohesiveness, you know, and that's super important because it has to be structured so that you can go crazy later and destruct it. But it has to start structured in all these different ways. Okay? So ask me anything. I think that's the talk.
Let's go. I have some questions for you, Kat. Like, what advice would you give artists who feel discouraged right now working in Web3 and all that? Where do they find jobs for artists and stuff like that?
Okay, so the as many of you know, I was in Kick Club Beast for like 2 years straight. So I disappeared from the world, the regular world, and when I left, I had to come back
Mhm.
and reconnect. And I noticed that there's like Instagram used to give me a bit of work, but it's a bit different now. It's more like influencers and and people showing body parts, right? And how
Yep.
pretty and cool they are. So Behance has been a very good place for me. It's very important that you present your projects correctly. Okay, so I have like 20 blue badges. For those who are in Behance, know that it's not easy, and the reason is there are a lot of crazy and amazing projects. In this case, I think that okay, so the project is good, but it's not only that. It's also because it's well structured. So you create a Behance project and you add your beautiful style frames, you add a working process, you add a behind the scene, you add a small explanation, not too much, but enough. And so you share the project and how you worked on it. So I always have a banner with the title. So if you check my Behance Mr. Cat, mr.kat, you'll see how they're presented. Just you can check the ones that got the blue badge. Uh, you don't need to have thousands of uploads, but you should have enough. So there's like a quite enough to scroll down, and be able to check that out. So that would be Behance for me has been a very good place.
Yep.
And then what I always say is put yourself where you get discovered. Okay, so I know that's very generic and it's not a exact solution, but usually, and especially for character design, is like if I reach out to an agency, to a studio, yeah, I do this, I work with these people, etc. It's not like it would be very. I'd be very lucky that at that precise moment, the studio or the agency is doing a project that requires a 3D artist like me, since I'm so specific. Because I have a spectrum, and the voice is good to call certain types of projects, and they call you for what you do instead of calling you for things that you don't know and you have to solve and it becomes a nightmare. But it's also something you have to be careful because you're so specific. You have to look globally, worldwide, which is. But you have to find a way that the ones that you're interested in discover you and feel that they're the ones that discovered you and not you that knocked on their door. So that's super important.
Do you think there's still tons of opportunities for artists in Web3, or they should focus as well on Web2?
Do I think if projects should focus on Web 2?
Do you think there's still tons of opportunities for artists like you in the space for Web3, for crypto, and all that? Or do you think they should focus as well on Web2?
So, okay. So instead of answering that question as a whole, I think
Yep.
because I think that we're all different and we're all in different stages of our career and of our life. What I do think is Web3 is a new land of opportunities that doesn't make Web2 exclusive or Web3 exclusive. You can,
Yep.
for me, it's like now with all the time I spent in Web3, and I enjoy a lot of things in Web3, and like I love doing this talk with you guys in Web3. I think because it's a group, a lot of passionate people. So I know that what I'm gonna say is gonna be worth it. So this means that I'm not gonna say no. I'm just a Web3 artist, and I'm gonna die if I don't get anything. No, I'm open to services in all areas. But I spend a lot of time in Web3, that's for sure.
Yep.
And I don't know what's gonna happen. As they say, now that the bear is coming, don't leave, because if you leave, it's worse. But the most important. I'm sorry, I'm blabbing a lot, but the most important is be yourself, and as yourself and what you want to do. Don't close any doors. And Web3 is a new door for creators. Now, if you see that's not working, look for Web2 spaces. You have to be open everywhere, and it can be very time consuming. It can make you go crazy, but it is what it is. And you plant the seeds in the new in all the different industries, and you go with the flow.
That's some words of wisdom right there. I mean, it's pretty much the same for every watch industry. You just have to stay consistent and all that. You just have to keep showing up every day. Sure. I agree with that.
Now, the thing is, like, like what is your goal, right?
Mhm.
And not what I saw in Web3 is like I'm a character artist, so I don't play much because I actually don't have much time to play. I actually play while I'm designing. Then you see all these collectors, you know, and you can't beat real collectors because they're always collecting. And I've always thought that what collectors have is like being a creator is a something special, but it's also a burden, you know, because except specific things, I'm more thinking about creating. But somebody who doesn't create, they're thinking about collecting in a curating kind of way. They're kind of like art directors, you know?
Mhm.
So we have like different mindsets, different disciplines, and they're all super valid and they all work and they're all what they make this industry what it is, right? So I don't really think about if I start overthinking where am I going to place myself, what am I going to do? It's not good. You know, you can get depressed. However, what you can do is not get distracted. Think about your goals, and independently, if it's Web 3, Web 2, just go all in because things are going to happen. People are going to call you.
That's so true. All right, guys, do you have any more questions? If not, we can maybe run the raffle in a bit. I'll give you 15 more seconds to talk questions. Damn, we have 20 people watching tonight, Kat. It's been a good night.
Oh, awesome, amazing! It's always a pleasure. It's been a while. I'm currently in a project in Indonesia and Vietnam.
Mhm.
I'm super busy, and I wanted to do something that I felt special. I'm always hesitant because I don't know if you guys want to see me modeling, you know, or which is a bit harder because I'm not. I always iterate a lot, you know. I'm not like that
Yep,
kind of educator, teachers that know how to do things
you
like
did
super
great.
organized. Awesome, thanks.
All right, I think we have no more question. But yo, before we start the giveaways, Kat, is there anything you've been building or working out recently that you want to promote to our audience for them to check out?
I'm still building internally. I'm in the trenches in the creator side, so I'm working on Croco in the background. I'm working on designing. I'm working on understanding stuff. So just follow me and like and retweet what I already do, please.
There you go, guys. Make sure
Just
to
please
drop Kat
support
a
me
follow.
however you can.